In July 2026, a new law came into force in the American state of Rhode Island.
Officially, it is called the Non-Owner Occupied Property Tax Act.
Almost nobody calls it that. The press named it something else. They called it the Taylor Swift tax.
So let's take Rhode Island. They have a new property tax on non-primary residences. It's also known as the Taylor Swift tax, since Taylor bought an oceanfront estate back in Watch Hill back in 2013.
She is not mentioned anywhere in the legislation. She did not campaign for it or against it, but she owns a house on a hill in Watch Hill, assessed by the town at more than $28 million. And the moment that law took effect, her annual bill on that one property rose by roughly $136,000.
One line item, one house, one state. And it is nowhere near the expensive part of being Taylor Swift. Forbes estimates her personal fortune at around $1.6 billion, making her one of the wealthiest self-made women alive. But wealth and expenditure are entirely different subjects. One is a number on a list. The other is a bill that arrives every month, whether you are working or not. So here is the question this film is going to answer. What does it actually cost? In aircraft, in property, in people, in tax, to be Taylor Swift for a single month?
She has never published that figure. Nobody has. There are no filings to read because almost everything she controls is privately held.
Taylor has become a billionaire not just because people like her songs, but because of a lot of smart business decisions that she's made over the years.
So we are going to build the number from the outside in. Public tax assessments, aviation records, published industry rates, reported figures from credible outlets, and we are going to be honest at every step about which is which. Because the total is not the interesting part. The interesting part is where the money actually goes. It is almost never where people assume. Start with what that $1.6 billion is actually made of, because this is where most people go wrong, before they have even begun. According to Forbes, her fortune breaks down roughly like this. Around $600 million accumulated from royalties and touring, a music catalogue valued at approximately $600 million, and around $125 million in real estate. Look closely at that list. Only one of those categories is money. The rest are things. A music catalogue is an asset. It generates income, but you cannot spend it. A property portfolio is an asset. It generates costs, and you cannot spend that either. Neither one pays a security team on a Tuesday. This is the single most misunderstood idea in wealth, and it explains almost everything that follows. The word is liquidity. Liquidity is not how much you have, it is how much of it you can actually reach this month, without selling something you do not want to sell. It is why a person can be worth more than $1 billion and still need income.
The popular cliques in their school, which is all kind of cascading down from the media and what we seem to prioritize in women.
And it is why the running costs of an extraordinary life have to be funded out of cash flow, not out of net worth. There is a mechanism the very wealthy use to bridge that gap, and it is worth understanding, because it explains a great deal of behaviour that otherwise looks irrational. Rather than selling a valuable asset to raise money, which crystallizes a tax event and permanently gives up future income, they borrow against it. The asset stays where it is. It keeps appreciating. It keeps generating royalties or rent or dividends, and the owner spends the borrowed money instead. Morgan Housel wrote an entire book about the psychology underneath this, but the arithmetic is unromantic. Selling is expensive and final. Borrowing is cheap and reversible. So when you see extraordinary spending alongside a fortune that never seems to shrink, this is usually what is happening. Nothing is being liquidated. Something is being leveraged. Which brings us to the first invoice. Swift owns a Dassault Falcon 7X, registered N621MM. It is a French trijet with a range of just under 6,000 nautical miles, which means it can cross the Pacific without stopping. Reported purchase estimates cluster around $54 million. Until early 2024, she also owned a second aircraft, a Falcon 900, which she sold. Aircraft registration and flight data are public in the United States, which is why we know more about her aviation than about almost any other part of her spending.
I guess, she's getting tracked. And this resulted in her selling her private jet, which you could go and buy for $44 million.
Publicly reported tracking data indicated her Falcon 7X completed around 98 flights in 2024, totaling roughly 225 hours in the air. In February 2024, that range was demonstrated publicly. She performed 4 shows in Tokyo, then flew roughly 5,500 miles across the Pacific to reach the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. The journey attracted so much speculation that the Japanese embassy issued a statement confirming it was logistically possible. That flight explains the aircraft. A shorter range jet cannot do it. which means the choice was not about comfort. It was about whether a schedule that would otherwise be impossible becomes possible. But public data cuts both ways. Because aircraft movements in the United States are a matter of public record, tracking accounts have been able to publish her movements in near real time, and her representatives have issued legal warnings to at least one student operating such an account. So there is a second cost buried in this section, and it does not appear on any invoice. Owning the aircraft solves the problem of moving. It creates the problem of being watched while you do it. Now, here is where it becomes genuinely counterintuitive. Most people assume a private jet costs money when it flies. It costs money, constantly. Industry cost models published for this aircraft type put annual crew costs in the region of $800,000. Hangarage, roughly $100,000 a year. Hull insurance, around $30,000. Liability cover, around $45,000. None of those numbers move if the aircraft never leaves the ground.
How is it possible to get this sort of aeroplane into a field this short? Okay, so number one for me, it's the low approach speed. This aeroplane came in today.
Fuel is separate. A Falcon 7X burns somewhere near 385 gallons an hour. Maintenance is separate again. And on an aircraft of this size, it is not maintenance in the way most people understand the word. It is a scheduled program of inspections and component replacements, with reserves set aside per flight hour, whether or not those hours are ever flown. Published estimates for the annual cost of running this aircraft range from around $1.8 million to more than $5 million. That spread is not sloppiness. It is the honest consequence of a variable nobody outside her operation knows. How many hours she actually flies in a given year, at what fuel price, on what routes, with what crew arrangements. But even at the conservative end of that range, the arithmetic is unforgiving. Somewhere around $200,000 a month, before the aircraft has carried a single passenger anywhere. That is the shape of the whole story. The purchase was never the expensive decision. Her first significant purchase came in 2009. She was 19. A penthouse in Nashville, bought for just under $2 million. Public records showed it appraised at more than $3.7 million by 2021. In 2013, she bought the Watch Hill estate in Rhode Island for around $17.75 million. 11,000 square feet, built in 1904, sitting on 5 acres at the highest point of the headland. She has said she paid cash.
Rhode Island's new Taylor Swift tax is now in effect, targeting valuable second home.
As of July 1st, there's a new property tax in Rhode Island that applies to non-owner-occupied residences worth more than $1 million.
Estimates of the total portfolio vary considerably. Some outlets have put it around $80 million. Business Insider has reported figures closer to $100 million. Forbes uses around $125 million. Those numbers disagree for an unglamorous reason. Different people are counting different properties, at different moments, using different methods. Some at purchase price, some at current assessment, some at estimated market value. When you see 3 confident valuations of the same portfolio, that is usually what you are looking at. Not a secret, a methodology. What matters more here is not what the portfolio is worth, it is what it consumes. A large estate does not sit quietly. It requires ground staff, a caretaker or estate manager, seasonal opening and closing, specialist insurance on a historic structure, monitored security systems, climate control in rooms nobody is using, and a maintenance schedule that never finishes because the building is more than a century old and standing in salt air. Multiply that across several properties in several states, most of them empty most of the time, and a portfolio stops behaving like an investment and starts behaving like a payroll. Which raises an obvious question. If a house you rarely occupy costs money every single day, why own several? Why not buy one extraordinary home and be done with it? There are 3 answers, and only one of them is about luxury. The first is diversification. Property in Nashville, Manhattan, Los Angeles, and coastal Rhode Island responds to 4 different markets. That is portfolio construction, not indulgence.
Might be in advertising. Maybe like coming up with slogans and concepts is the same as hooks and songs.
The second is work. Recording, business, and touring cluster around specific cities. Owning in those cities removes an enormous amount of logistical friction over a 20-year career. And the third is the one nobody puts in a property brochure. When your location is a matter of public interest, having several plausible locations is itself a form of protection. Predictability is the vulnerability. A person with one home can always be found at it. That is the moment a property portfolio stops being an asset class and starts being infrastructure. But there was one cost nobody in that industry was modelling. Reporting from the era's tour period described a close protection operation of a scale normally associated with heads of state. Multiple outlets reported around 83 full-time close protection officers, 4 of whom were with her at all times, a configuration the industry calls a quartet formation. with a further 140 personnel deployed around venues when required. Close protection is a real profession, with published rates. In the United Kingdom, an experienced officer costs somewhere from £800 a day. Reporting on the European leg of the tour cited daily rates of around $1,100 per officer. Apply an average long-term salary to a team of that size, and you arrive at figures above $12 million a year. One tabloid reported an $8 million annual arrangement, covering her and her husband. How that operation is structured is as revealing as what it costs. Reporting suggests the officers are contracted through specialist agencies, rather than employed directly by her management company. That is a deliberate arrangement, and it is standard at this level. It moves employment liability, insurance, vetting, training, and rota management onto firms that do nothing else. It allows the team to expand for a stadium tour and contract afterwards without redundancy exposure. And it means no permanent list of names sitting inside one organisation. The protection extends past people. Facial recognition technology has been deployed at her events to screen crowds against known stalking threats, a measure that exists because the threat is documented, not theoretical. And here we have to stop and be careful, because this is the moment where most videos about celebrity spending quietly stop telling the truth. When one outlet published that $8 million figure, another responded with a line worth remembering. It pointed out that the outlet would have no way of knowing what Swift spends on anything.
I know that everybody has busy lives, so I do feel the need to explain what I'm doing because it's not...
That is correct. She has never confirmed a security budget. Nobody has audited one. Every number in this section is a reconstruction built from industry rates and reported team sizes. What we can say with confidence is the direction and the reason. Security cost does not scale with wealth. It scales with recognizability. A billionaire nobody can identify walks through an airport unaccompanied. A person whose face is known in every country on earth cannot enter a building, attend a sporting fixture, or leave her own home without a logistics operation preceding her. This is the tax that fame charges, and money cannot remove. The wealthier she becomes, the less freely she can move, and the more it costs to move at all. Which brings us back to that house on the hill. In 2025, Rhode Island passed a levy on residential property assessed above $1 million, but is not occupied by its owner or a tenant for at least 183 days a year. It took effect on the 1st of July, 2026. The mechanism is simple. $2.50 for every $500 of assessed value above the $1 million threshold. An effective rate of 0.5% on the excess. A property assessed at $2 million owes around $5,000 a year. At $5 million, around $20,000. Swift's Watch Hill estate is assessed by the town of Westerly at more than $28 million. Her bill rises by approximately $136,000 a year, unless she qualifies for an exemption. The revenue is earmarked for the state's low-income housing tax credit fund, and the reach of it is much wider than one famous house. State figures identified more than 22,000 residential properties assessed above $1 million, of which around 8,200 were flagged as non-owner occupied. Projected revenue, roughly $24.5 million. A legal challenge on constitutional grounds was expected almost immediately. Now, look at what actually happened here. A state legislature wrote a general revenue measure. The measure was named, in public and in the press, after a private individual who is not mentioned in it. That is the point at which someone stops being a wealthy person and becomes something else entirely.
Yeah, actually, I was in Paris doing a music video and I got to go to a fashion show.
A category, a reference point, a shorthand that a newspaper can print without explanation, and every reader will understand. Fame at that altitude does not simply attract attention. It starts to shape the rules around it. Policy is written with you in the room, whether or not you are invited. And no amount of money buys you out of that. It is the one cost on this entire list that cannot be paid. So let us put the month together. The aircraft, somewhere near $200,000. Security, reconstructed from reported team sizes and published day rates, plausibly several $100,000 more. Property carrying costs across the portfolio, into 6 figures. Management, staff, legal, insurance, touring infrastructure, and the enormous administrative machinery of a business that operates in dozens of countries at once. A defensible standing cost before a single tour truck moves sits somewhere in the low millions of dollars a month. And that number, however large, is not the answer to the question. Because on the 30th of May, 2025, Taylor Swift bought her own past. After 6 years of public dispute, she acquired the master recordings of her first 6 albums from the private equity firm Shamrock Capital. Every recording, plus the videos, the concert films, the unreleased material, and the artwork.
So I was having a lot of conversations about breakups. I watched movies that were really like...
She did not disclose the price. Sources cited by Billboard put it at around $360 million. Other reporting suggested a figure closer to $300 million. Both are estimates. Neither has been confirmed by her. The history matters. Her former label was sold in 2019. The catalogue changed hands again in 2020 for a reported $405 million. Then, she re-recorded the albums herself, and audiences moved to the new versions in enormous numbers, in some cases outstreaming the originals by a factor of 10. By the time she came to buy, the thing she was buying was worth less than it had been, because she had personally reduced its value. Set that against everything else in this film. The jet is a rounding error. The estate is a rounding error. A year of the largest private security operation in entertainment is a rounding error. The single most expensive thing Taylor Swift has ever bought was the right to own what she had already made. And that is the lesson that reaches beyond her, because it is not really about fame at all. At every level of wealth, the visible spending is the cheap part. The car, the watch, the house, those are purchases, and purchases end. What actually consumes a fortune are the things that recur. Maintenance, staff, insurance, tax, and above all, control. The price of owning the thing that generates the money in the first place. Most people spend their lives buying assets that cost them money. The very wealthy spend theirs buying back the ones that make it. Privilege index, where wealth isn't measured by what people own, but by what it takes to keep it.